Sometimes, the people we think we know best are the ones hiding the deepest secrets. And sometimes those secrets hold the key to everything we've been searching for. When 52-year-old Warren Hollis inherited an old aircraft hangar from his late uncle, everyone in town laughed at him. They thought it was just a rusted shell with nothing inside. Warren thought the same. But when he unlocked those heavy doors, he found a Cold War military jet covered in dust, untouched for decades. Inside the cockpit, he discovered classified documents and his uncle's encrypted journals carefully hidden away. His uncle had been part of a secret program the government wanted forgotten. Now, Warren has to decide what to do with a legacy no one ever honored. What was his uncle protecting all those years? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Warren Hollis had been driving for 6 hours straight when the weathered sign for Millbrook appeared through the morning fog. 20 years since he'd last seen it. 20 years since he'd left this town in his rearview mirror, swearing he'd never come back. Yet here he was, 52 years old. Everything he owned packed into the back of a 15-year-old Subaru, returning to the one place he'd spent half his life trying to forget. The divorce papers had been finalized 6 months ago. Sharon had kept the house in Portland, the retirement accounts, most of their friends. Warren had kept his pride, though that was worth considerably less on the open market. His architecture firm had downsized him out 3 months after that. Budget cuts, they said. Nothing personal. At his age, in this economy, finding equivalent work had proved impossible. The severance package lasted exactly 9 weeks. For the past 3 weeks, Warren had been living in his car, packing in rest stops and gym parking lots, showering at truck stops, eating gas station sandwiches, and wondering how his life had come to this. Then the lawyer's letter arrived, forwarded from his old address. His uncle Raymond had passed away. Heart failure, quiet and quick. The funeral had already happened. Warren hadn't even known Raymond was sick. The letter requested his presence for the reading of the will. Raymond Hollis had been Warren's father's younger brother, a quiet man who'd never married, never had children of his own. Warren remembered him as a distant figure from childhood, someone who appeared at Christmas dinners and 4th of July barbecues, but always seemed somehow separate from the family, present but not quite there. He'd asked Warren about school, about baseball, but his eyes always seemed focused on something else, somewhere else. By the time Warren was a teenager, Raymond had become even more reclusive, eventually withdrawing from family gatherings altogether. The last time Warren had seen him was at his mother's funeral. 12 years ago, Raymond had stood at the back of the church, alone, and left before the reception. Warren had meant to reach out afterward, but life got busy. Work consumed him, marriage consumed him, and then Raymond was just another person he'd meant to call but never did. Now Raymond was gone, and Warren was pulling into Millbrook on a gray November morning, heading toward the office of Harold Penfield, attorney at law. The town hadn't changed much. Main Street still had the same brick storefronts, the same diner with the red vinyl booths visible through the window, the same barber shop with the spinning pole. A few new chain stores had appeared on the outskirts, but the heart of Millbrook remained stubbornly frozen in time. Warren parked in front of the lawyer's office, a narrow building squeezed between a hardware store and a pharmacy. Inside, Harold Penfield turned out to be a man in his 70s with liver-spotted hands and reading glasses that kept sliding down his nose. His office smelled of old paper and lemon furniture polish. "Mr. Hollis," Penfield said, shaking Warren's hand with surprising firmness. "Thank you for coming. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Warren said, though he wasn't sure what exactly he'd lost. A distant uncle he barely knew? The opportunity to know him better? Both seemed equally true and equally pointless to mourn now. Penfield gestured to a chair and settled. himself behind an oak desk piled with manila folders. Your uncle's estate is quite simple. No liquid assets to speak of. His Social Security barely covered his living expenses, but he did own one property, outright an aircraft hangar on the eastern edge of town, about 4 miles out on Route 17. Warren frowned. A hangar? Yes. It's been in the family since the 1950s, apparently. Your uncle maintained ownership all these years, paid the property taxes faithfully. Penfield shuffled through papers. I'll be frank with you, Mr. Hollis. It's not worth much. The structure is old, likely needs significant repairs. The land it sits on has minimal value. Too far from town center for commercial development, not suitable for residential. I've had a few inquiries over the years from people interested in scrapping it for metal, but your uncle always refused to sell. What did he use it for? Penfield shrugged. Storage, I suppose. He was quite private about it. Rarely let anyone near the property. He slid a key ring across the desk, 2 old brass keys on a simple metal ring. These are yours now. The deed is being transferred. There are some tax documents you'll need to sign. Warren picked up the keys. They were heavy, warm from sitting in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. That's it? Just an old hangar? That's it, Penfield confirmed. I understand it's not much of an inheritance. If you want to sell, I can connect you with a salvage company. They'd probably offer a few thousand for the metal alone. Warren pocketed the keys. A few $1,000s. It wouldn't change his life, but it would buy him a couple months of breathing room. I'll take a look at it first. Penfield nodded and produced more paperwork. Warren signed where indicated, barely reading the legal language. His mind was elsewhere, turning over the strange fact of his uncle spending decades maintaining an aircraft hangar. Raymond had never been a pilot, as far as Warren knew. Had never even mentioned an interest in aviation. When the paperwork was complete, Warren stood to leave. Penfield walked him to the door. Your uncle was a good man, the lawyer said quietly. Kept to himself, but always paid his bills on time. Never caused trouble. There were people in this town who thought he was odd, maybe even a bit touched in the head. But I respected him. He had his reasons for living the way he did. What reasons? Warren asked. Penfield smiled sadly. I never asked, and he never said. Some men carry their burdens quietly, Mr. Hollis. Your uncle was one of them. Warren left the office with more questions than answers. He sat in his car for a long moment, staring at the keys in his palm. Then he started the engine and headed east on Route 17. The hangar sat on 5 acres of overgrown land, surrounded by a chain-link fence that had seen better days. The structure itself was enormous, at least 100 feet long and 60 feet wide. Its corrugated metal walls, streaked with rust and faded military paint in shades of olive and tan. The massive sliding doors at the front were secured with a heavy padlock. Weeds grew waist-high around the foundation. Warren parked outside the fence and walked the perimeter. No signs of recent activity. No tire tracks in the dirt driveway. The windows were too high and too dirty to see through. The whole place had the abandoned, forgotten quality of something the world had moved past and left behind. He approached the main doors and fitted the first key into the padlock. It turned smoothly, well-oiled despite the rust on the lock's exterior. The padlock opened with a solid click. Warren removed it and set it aside, then grabbed the door's handle and pulled. The door resisted at first, then gave way with a metallic groan. Light spilled into the darkness beyond. Warren pulled harder, sliding the door open wide enough to step through. The interior was dim, lit only by the light from the open door and a few grimy windows set high in the walls. But even in the half-light, Warren could see it. The jet sat in the center of the hangar like a sleeping beast, its nose pointed toward the doors. Dust covered every surface, but beneath the grime, Warren could make out the sleek lines of the fuselage, the swept wings, the bubble canopy of the cockpit. It was painted in military gray, with faded markings barely visible along the tail. Warren stood frozen, unable to process what he was seeing. A jet, an actual military jet, in his uncle's hangar. He moved closer, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. The concrete floor was stained with oil and marked with old tire tracks. Against the walls, he could see workbenches, tool chests, shelves lined with equipment he couldn't identify. But his attention remained fixed on the aircraft. It was beautiful. Even covered in decades of dust, even sitting dormant and forgotten, it possessed an undeniable grace. Warren walked around it slowly, taking in every detail. The landing gear looked solid. The tires, though flat, showed no signs of rot. He ran his hand along the wing. The metal was cold and smooth beneath the dust. Near the tail, he found a small placard riveted to the fuselage, barely legible beneath the grime. He rubbed it clean with his sleeve. 86 Sabre. And below that, a serial number. Warren's heart was pounding now. This wasn't just any old plane. This was a piece of history. The F-86 had been America's premier fighter jet during the Korean War. He'd read about them, seen them in documentaries. They were legendary aircraft, prized by collectors and museums. What was one doing in his uncle's hangar? He moved to the front of the jet and found a ladder aluminum extending up to the cockpit. Without thinking, he began to climb. The canopy was closed, but not locked. He lifted it with some effort, and it rose smoothly on its hinges, revealing the cockpit interior. The pilot's seat was cracked leather, the instrument panel a bewildering array of dials and switches. Everything was covered in dust, but remarkably well preserved. And there, on the dashboard, partially hidden beneath a cloth, Warren saw something that made his breath catch. A pair of silver pilot wings. Tarnished but unmistakable. Military aviator wings. His uncle had been a pilot. Warren carefully picked up the wings, feeling their weight in his palm. How had he never known this? How had the family never known? He set the wings aside gently and looked around the cockpit more carefully. That's when he noticed the storage compartment behind the ejection seat, slightly ajar, as if someone had opened it and never quite closed it properly. Warren reached back and pulled the compartment open fully. Inside were papers, stacks of them, bound with rubber bands that crumbled at his touch. And beneath the papers, a leather-bound journal, its cover worn and cracked with age. Warren gathered everything carefully and climbed back down the ladder. He carried his findings to a workbench near the wall and spread them out under a bare light bulb he managed to coax to life with a pull chain. Flight logs, mission reports, documents stamped with red letters, classified, and the journal, filled with his uncle's handwriting, small, precise, methodical. Warren opened the first page. Project Sentinel. Northern Protocol. 1952-1968. His hands were shaking as he turned the pages, seeing dates, coordinates, cryptic notes about cargo runs and ghost flights, call signs he didn't recognize, references to classified missions. His uncle Raymond, quiet, reclusive Raymond, had been part of something significant, something secret, something the government had classified and apparently forgotten. Warren looked up at the jet, seeing it now not as a relic but as evidence. His uncle had kept this aircraft, maintained it, hidden it, for a reason, and Warren had just inherited that reason. Warren spent the rest of that afternoon sitting at the workbench, carefully going through the documents he'd found in the cockpit. The light was poor and his eyes strained, but he couldn't stop. Each page revealed another fragment of a story he'd never known existed. The flight logs were meticulous. Every entry included a date, departure and arrival times, weather conditions, and a brief note about the mission's purpose. But the purposes were maddeningly vague. Cargo transport, personnel relocation, equipment delivery. Nothing specific. Nothing that explained why these missions needed to be classified. The dates ranged from March 1952 to August 1968. 16 years of flying. Warren did the math. His uncle would have been in his 20s when these missions started, early 40s when they ended. The prime years of his life spent doing something important enough to classify, secret enough to hide. Warren turned his attention to the journal. Unlike the official flight logs, this was personal. Raymond's handwriting filled every page, but much of it was in code strings of letters and numbers that made no immediate sense. Warren flipped through, looking for anything written in plain English near the middle of the journal. He found a passage that made him pause. June 14th, 1966. Another run to Elmendorf. Viper flew wing. Don't trust him. Something's off. He asks too many questions about the cargo, about the routes. Reported my concerns to command. They said to keep flying, keep watching. Viper. A call sign, obviously. Warren flipped through more pages, looking for other references. July 2nd, 1966. Viper wasn't at the briefing. Command says he's been reassigned. Doesn't feel right. September 18th, 1966. Paul didn't come back. Neither did Kendrick. They said it was mechanical failure. They're lying. Viper sold us out. I know it. I can feel it. Warren's chest tightened. Paul, his uncle's brother. Warren's father. His father had died when Warren was 6 years old. The family had been told it was a car accident, a rainy night, a slick road, bad luck. Warren's mother had been devastated but stoic, raising Warren alone, never remarrying. She'd rarely spoken about Paul, and when she did, it was always in the past tense, always brief. Warren had accepted this growing up. Some griefs were too deep to revisit. But now, reading his uncle's words, a different story emerged. His father hadn't died in a car accident. He'd died flying a classified mission. A mission that had been compromised. Warren's hands were shaking as he continued reading. September 20th, 1966. Command. Won't investigate. They say the loss of Paul and Kendrick was equipment malfunction. No evidence of hostile action. But I know what happened. Viper gave them our routes, our schedules. Someone was waiting. Command knows it too. They just don't want the scandal. October 5th, 1966. Found Viper. Confronted him. He denied everything, but I saw it in his eyes. He's guilty. Gave command everything I had. They buried it. Said the program is too important to risk exposure. Viper's family has connections. Senator father. They're protecting him. Warren set the journal down, his mind reeling. His uncle had known for decades that his brother Warren's father had been killed because of betrayal. And the military had covered it up. He forced himself to keep reading, to piece together the full story. Over the next several pages, Raymond documented his attempts to seek justice. Letters to commanding officers. Requests for formal investigations. All denied. All deflected. The program was classified. The deaths were regrettable but closed cases. Move on. Keep flying. Keep quiet. The final entry in the journal was dated December 1968. They're shutting down Project Sentinel. Too expensive, they say. Too risky. The truth is, they want to bury what happened. Bury Paul. Bury Kendrick. Bury all of it. They're decommissioning the aircraft, destroying the records. But not mine. I'm keeping my bird. I'm keeping the proof. Someday, someone will care. Someday, the truth will matter. Warren closed the journal and sat in the silence of the hangar. The bare bulb above cast harsh shadows. The jet loomed behind him, a monument to secrets and sacrifice. His father had been a pilot, had died in service, and the family had never known. He gathered the documents carefully, stacking them on the workbench. He needed to take these somewhere safe, somewhere he could study them properly. The motel where he'd planned to spend the night seemed inadequate. but it would have to do for now. Warren took one last look around the hangar before leaving. As he moved toward the door, something caught his eye: fresh scuff marks on the concrete floor near the side entrance. He walked over and examined them. The marks were recent, cutting through the layer of dust. Someone had been here recently. He checked the side door. It was locked from the inside, but the lock looked flimsy, easy to pick or force. Warren's unease grew. He glanced around the hangar, seeing it now with different eyes. If the documents were as sensitive as they seemed, and if Raymond had kept them hidden all these years, there might be people who didn't want them surfacing now. Warren hurried to gather everything from the workbench. He found an old canvas bag hanging on a hook and carefully placed the flight logs, mission reports, and journal inside. He climbed back up to the cockpit and checked the storage compartment empty now. He'd gotten everything back on the ground. He took the silver pilot wings from the workbench and slipped them into his jacket pocket. Then he headed for the door. Outside, the afternoon had turned to early evening. The November sky was heavy with clouds. Warren locked the hangar doors and returned to his car. As he drove back toward town, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. At the motel, a rundown place on the edge of Millbrook, called the Pine Rest, Warren checked in and carried his bag to a room on the second floor. The room was exactly what he'd expected. Thin carpet, floral bedspread, television bolted to the dresser. But it was clean and private. He spread the documents across the bed and spent the evening reading through everything systematically. The more he read, the clearer the picture became. Project Sentinel had been a covert operation during the Cold War, using military pilots to transport classified materials across North America and beyond. The missions were off-book, the flights unrecorded in official logs. The program operated in the shadows, essential but deniable. And somewhere in that shadow, a pilot named Viper. Warren still didn't know his real name, had betrayed his fellow airmen, had sold information, compromised missions. 2 pilots had died as a result. One of them was Warren's father. Raymond had tried to expose the betrayal and had been shut down. The program had been more important than justice. Viper had been protected. Raymond had been told to forget, but Raymond hadn't forgotten. He'd kept the jet, kept the evidence, kept the truth alive for 50 years, waiting. Warren sat on the edge of the bed, holding his father's story in his hands. He thought about his childhood, about growing up without a father, about his mother's quiet sadness that never quite faded, about his uncle's distance, his withdrawal from the family. It all made sense now. Raymond had been carrying this burden alone, unable to share it, unable to let it go. Warren picked up the journal and opened it to the last page. Below the final entry, Raymond had written one more line in different ink, added years later, for Warren. When you find this, finish what I couldn't. Warren stared at those words for a long time. His uncle had known, had hoped, had left this all for him. Outside the motel window, headlights swept across the parking lot. Warren stood and looked out. A black sedan was pulling in, packing 3 spaces down from his car. The driver didn't get out, just sat there, engine idling. Warren stepped back from the window, his heart rate climbing. He told himself it was paranoia, that he was jumping at shadows. But the feeling persisted. He grabbed the canvas bag and shoved the most important documents inside the journal. The classified mission reports, a few key flight logs. The rest he hid in the room, tucked behind the dresser and under the mattress. If someone came looking, they'd find something. But not everything. Warren sat in the chair by the window, lights off, and watched the sedan. After 20 minutes, it finally pulled away. He didn't sleep well that night. Every sound in the hallway made him tense. Every car passing on the road outside drew his attention. By morning, he'd made a decision. He couldn't handle this alone. He needed help, someone who could verify what he'd found, someone who could help expose the truth. He needed someone who knew how to navigate stories like this, how to bring buried secrets into the light. Warren pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for. Fiona Templeton. They'd gone to college together, lost touch after graduation, but reconnected on social media a few years back. She was an investigative journalist now, working for a major newspaper. If anyone could help him, it was Fiona. He composed a careful message, not revealing too much, just enough to pique her interest. Then he hit send and waited. The reply came faster than expected. Warren? Long time. What kind of story? Call me. Warren smiled grimly. He dialed her number. Fiona? It's Warren Hollis. I need your help with something. It's about my uncle, a Cold War cover-up, and a betrayal that got my father killed. Can you come to Millbrook? There was a pause on the other end. Then Fiona's voice, sharp with interest. I'll be there in 3 days. Don't talk to anyone else about this until I arrive. And Warren? Be careful. Warren promised he would be. But as he hung up and looked at the canvas bag full of secrets, he knew careful might not be enough. The truth was dangerous. And he just committed to uncovering all of it. Warren spent the next morning at the hangar, this time with a purpose beyond discovery. He needed to understand what his uncle had preserved and why it mattered. The jet sat like a silent witness to decades of secrets, and Warren felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He started with the workbench, finding it more organized than he'd initially realized. Tools were arranged by size and type in drawers that slid open smoothly despite their age. His uncle had maintained this space with care, treating it like a sanctuary. Warren found maintenance logs documenting every service performed on the aircraft: oil changes, inspections, part replacements. The most recent entry was dated 5 years ago, just months before Raymond's health had started declining. The jet had been flight-ready. Raymond had kept it operational for decades. Warren pulled out the journal again and began working on the coded entries. The substitution cipher wasn't complex once he recognized the pattern, a simple alphabetic shift that Raymond had used consistently. It took Warren 2 hours of careful work, but he managed to decode the first entry. March 15th, 1952. First run to Thule. Cargo. Uranium samples for testing. Route classified. Weather clear. Viper flew number 2 position. Good pilot, but cocky. Command briefed us on security protocols. This program is bigger than I thought. Warren continued decoding, entry by entry. The missions became clearer, transporting nuclear materials, ferrying intelligence officers, delivering classified equipment to remote installations across North America. Project Sentinel had been the invisible supply line of the Cold War, moving secrets through the sky. He found multiple references to Viper throughout the decoded entries. The relationship between Raymond and this other pilot seemed cordial at first, even friendly. But around 1965, the tone shifted. January 8th, 1965. Viper is in debt. Heard him on the phone at the barracks arguing about money. He saw me listening, didn't look happy. None of my business, but it worries me. April 22nd, 1965. Viper asked strange questions during mission brief. Wanted to know exact cargo manifest, final destination coordinates. Command shut him down. He laughed it off, but I saw his face. He's desperate for something. Warren set down his pencil and stared at the decoded text. Viper had been compromised by debt. Had probably sold classified information to pay it off. And Raymond had seen it happening, had tried to warn people, but no one had listened until it was too late. He needed to know. Viper's real name. Warren gathered the documents and locked the hangar carefully. He drove into town and found the Millbrook Public Library, a small brick building on Maple Street. Inside, an elderly woman sat at the circulation desk reading a paperback novel. "Excuse me," Warren said. "I'm looking for information about military, personnel who might have been stationed near here during the 1950s and 60s. The woman looked up, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. That's very specific. We don't have much military history here. Millbrook's never had a base. My uncle lived here. He was a pilot. I'm trying to learn more about his service. The woman's expression softened. What was your uncle's name? Raymond Hollis. Her face changed recognition mixed with something Warren couldn't quite read. Sadness, maybe. Or regret. Raymond. Yes, I knew him. Not well, but I knew him. He used to come in here years ago, always checking out books about aviation history, Cold War politics. Kept to himself mostly. She paused. I'm Constance Wheeler. I've been the librarian here for 43 years. Did he ever talk about his service? Constance shook her head. Raymond didn't talk much about anything personal, but I remember he changed after he came back. This would have been late 60s. He'd been gone for a year's military service, I assumed, and when he returned, he was different, quieter, sadder, I suppose. He bought that old hangar and hardly came into town after that. Do you remember him having any conflicts with anyone? Any falling out? Constance's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. There was something. I don't remember the details, but I recall people talking. Raymond had accused someone of something serious. No one believed him, or maybe they didn't want to believe him. Either way, it didn't go well for Raymond. People started avoiding him, treating him like he was troubled. She leaned forward. Why are you asking about this now? Warren hesitated, then decided partial truth was better than lies. I inherited Raymond's hangar. Found some things inside that suggest he was involved in classified work. I'm trying to understand what happened to him. Constance nodded slowly. He deserved better than he got from this town. We should have listened. She stood and walked to a filing cabinet against the wall. We keep old newspaper archives. Not digitized, but we have microfiche going back to the 1950s. You might find something there. She set Warren up at a microfiche reader in a back corner of the library. He started with 1966, the year his father died, and scrolled through month by month. Most of it was small-town news council meetings, school events, local obituaries. Then he found it. October 1966. A small article buried on page 7. Local, man dismissed from military service, Raymond Hollis, 34, of Millbrook, has been honorably discharged from the Air Force following what sources describe as unfounded accusations against a fellow serviceman. Details of the incident remain classified, but military officials stated that Mr. Hollis's claims were thoroughly investigated and determined to be without merit. Mr. Hollis could not be reached for comment. Warren read it 3 times. Honorably discharged a way of quietly removing Raymond without admitting fault. The accusations had been buried, dismissed as unfounded. Raymond's career had ended, his credibility destroyed, all to protect someone else. He scrolled forward through 1967 and 1968, looking for any mention of Viper's real identity. He found nothing in the Millbrook papers, but that made sense. If Viper had connections, if his family was powerful, they'd have kept his name out of local news. Warren thanked Constance and left the library with more questions than answers. He sat in his car and pulled out his phone. 3 days until Fiona arrived. 3 days to gather as much information as possible. He needed to find someone who'd served with Raymond, someone who remembered Project Sentinel and the pilots involved. The journal had mentioned other names' call signs, mostly, but a few real names appeared in the decoded entries. One name appeared multiple times in friendly contexts, Floyd Kensington. Warren searched online and found a Floyd Kensington, age 89, living at Pinecrest Veterans Home about 2 hours north. It could be a coincidence, but the age matched. If this was the same Floyd, he might remember Raymond, might remember Viper. Warren was about to start the engine when he noticed movement in his rearview mirror. A black sedan, the same one from the motel, or one just like it was parked half a block behind him. The windows were tinted, the plates standard issue but somehow official looking. Warren's jaw tightened. He wasn't imagining this. Someone was watching him. He pulled out of the parking space and drove slowly through town, taking random turns, checking his mirror constantly. The sedan followed at a distance, never getting too close, but never falling away completely. They wanted him to know he was being watched. It was a message. Warren led them back toward the hangar, then suddenly turned down a side road and accelerated. He took 3 quick turns through a residential neighborhood and emerged onto the highway heading north. The sedan was gone, at least temporarily. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel. He needed answers, and he needed them before whoever was watching decided to do more than just follow. Floyd Kensington was now his best hope. Warren pointed the car north and drove, the drive to Pinecrest. Veterans Home took Warren through countryside that gradually shifted from flat farmland to rolling hills covered in bare November trees. He kept checking his mirrors, but the black sedan didn't reappear. Either he'd lost them, or they already knew where he was going. The Veterans Home sat on a hillside overlooking a small lake. It was a modern facility, all glass and brick, with wide windows that must have offered beautiful views in better weather. Today, under heavy gray clouds, it looked institutional despite its pleasant design. Warren parked and sat for a moment, gathering his thoughts. He'd brought the journal and a few of the decoded entries, but he wasn't sure how to approach this. Floyd Kensington might not remember Raymond, might not want to talk about classified missions from 50 years ago, might not even be the right Floyd Kensington. Only one way to find out. Inside, the lobby smelled like pine cleaner and coffee. A young woman at the reception desk looked up with a professional smile. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to visit Floyd Kensington. I'm Warren Hollis. He doesn't know I'm coming, but I believe he served with my uncle." The woman checked her computer. "Mr. Kensington is in the common room. Down that hall, second door on the left. He's usually there this time of day." Warren followed her directions and found the common room, a large space with comfortable chairs, a television playing the news on low volume, and several elderly men scattered around reading or dozing. He approached the desk where a nurse was updating charts. "I'm looking for Floyd Kensington." She pointed to a man sitting alone by the window, staring out at the lake. "That's Floyd. He's having a good day today, memory sharp. Just don't tire him out too much." Warren crossed the room and stopped beside the chair. The man was thin, his face deeply lined, his hair pure white and carefully combed. He wore a cardigan over a button-down shirt, reading glasses hanging from a chain around his neck. "Mr. Kensington, my name is Warren Hollis. I wonder if I might talk to you about someone you served with, Raymond Hollis." Floyd turned slowly from the window. His eyes were pale blue, watery with age, but they sharpened with recognition at Raymond's name. "Raymond Hollis. Haven't heard that name in a long time." His voice was rough, but clear. "You said you're Warren?" "Yes, sir. Raymond's nephew. He passed away recently, and I inherited his hangar. Found some things inside that raised questions about his service." Floyd studied Warren's face for a long moment, then gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Sit down, son. If Raymond left you his hangar, then he wanted you to know. About time someone did." Warren sat, his heart racing. "You remember him?" "Remember him?" Floyd's expression softened with old affection and older grief. "Raymond was my best friend for 6 years. We flew together, trusted each other with our lives. He was the best pilot I ever knew, and the best man." He paused. "When did he die?" 3 weeks ago. Heart failure." Floyd closed his eyes briefly. He deserved better than he got. "We all failed him in the end. What happened?" Warren asked quietly. Floyd was silent for a moment, then began to speak. We were part of something called Project Sentinel. Started in the early 50s during the Korean War, continued through the 60s. We flew classified missions, cargo runs, mostly, but the cargo was sensitive. Nuclear materials, intelligence packages, high-value personnel. The kind of stuff the government couldn't risk on regular military transports or commercial flights. So they used a small group of pilots operating off-book invisible. Warren pulled out the journal. Raymond kept records. I've been decoding his entries. He mentioned someone with the call sign Viper. Floyd's face darkened. Hugh Brennan. That was Viper's real name. Finally, a name. Warren leaned forward. What did he do? Hugh was a good pilot. I'll give him that. But he was reckless in other ways. Gambled, got himself into debt. By 1965, he was desperate. We didn't know how desperate until it was too late. Floyd's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. Hugh sold mission details to foreign intelligence. Routes, schedules, cargo manifests. We don't know exactly who he sold to Soviet agents, probably, or intermediaries. But the information got into the wrong hands. My father, Warren said, his voice tight. Paul Hollis. He died in September 1966. Floyd turned to look at Warren, and the sorrow in his eyes was profound. Paul was your father? God, I'm sorry. Paul was a hell of a pilot and a good man. So was Jack Kendrick, the other pilot who died that day. They were ambushed during what should have been a routine cargo run. Someone was waiting for them, knew exactly when and where they'd be. Both planes went down over Canadian wilderness. Took 3 days to find the crash sites. Warren's throat was tight. The family was told it was a car accident. The military lied to protect the program. If the real story came out, the classified missions had been compromised, that pilots had been killed because of a traitor in the ranks, the whole operation would have been exposed. So they invented cover stories. Car accident. Training mishap. Mechanical failure. Anything but the truth. And Hugh Brennan? Floyd's expression turned bitter. Raymond figured it out. He'd been suspicious of Hugh for months. Noticed the odd behavior, the questions Hugh asked. After Paul and Jack died, Raymond started digging. Found evidence of Hugh's debts, his contacts with suspicious individuals. Raymond reported everything to command. Demanded an investigation. What happened? Nothing. Floyd spat the word. Hugh's father was Senator Arnold Brennan. Powerful man with connections everywhere. The investigation was opened and shut within a week. Military determined there was insufficient evidence of wrongdoing. Hugh was quietly transferred to a desk job stateside, served out his time, and left with an honorable discharge. Raymond tried to push it further, went over heads, made noise, so they forced him out too. Honorable discharge, but everyone knew what it really was. Shut up and go away. Warren felt anger rising in his chest. They let him get away with it. They did. Hugh went on to live a comfortable life. Last I heard, he's retired somewhere upstate, living off his family money and his pension. Never faced a day of consequences for what he did. Floyd reached out and gripped Warren's arm with surprising strength. Raymond spent the rest of his life carrying that weight, the knowledge that his brother died because of betrayal. That justice was denied. He kept that jet as evidence, kept all those records. He was waiting for the right time, the right person. Floyd released Warren's arm and reached into his cardigan pocket. He pulled out a small brass compass, its surface worn smooth with age. He held it out to Warren. Raymond gave this to me years ago, told me to keep it safe. Said if anyone came asking about him about what happened, I should give it to them. He knew someday someone would come. I think he hoped it would be you. Warren took the compass, turning it over in his hands. Engraved on the back were the words, "To Raymond, true north, F.K." He always found his way, Floyd said quietly, even when the rest of us lost ours. Take that, remember him. and finish what he couldn't. "Hugh Brennan," Warren said. "He's still alive?" Floyd nodded. "Far as I know. Lives up near Riverside, maybe an hour from here. Big house from what I've heard. Money can buy a lot of comfort, even if it can't buy a clean conscience." Warren sat back, his mind churning. He had a name now. He had testimony from someone who'd been there. He had evidence. But he also had powerful enemies. Hugh's family clearly still had influence if someone was following Warren. Searching his motel room. "Mr. Kensington Floyd, would you be willing to go on record to tell this story officially?" Floyd met his eyes. "I'm 89 years old, son. I've got nothing to lose and a lot to make up for. I should have backed Raymond up years ago when it mattered. I was afraid of losing my pension, my benefits. I was a coward." He straightened in his chair. "But I'm not dead yet. If you're going after the truth, I'll stand with you." Warren felt something loosening in his chest. Hope, maybe, or just the relief of not being alone in this anymore. "Thank you. I have a journalist coming to Millbrook in a couple days. Would you be willing to talk to her? Bring her here. I'll tell her everything." Warren stood and shook Floyd's hand. The old man's grip was firm despite the tremor. "Raymond spoke well of you," Warren said. "He kept your compass with him all these years." Floyd's eyes grew wet. "He was a better friend than I deserved. Make sure people know what kind of man he was. What kind of man your father was." "I will," Warren promised. He left the veteran's home as the afternoon light was fading. The drive back to Millbrook felt different, now purposeful, determined. He had a name. He had a witness. He had evidence. The pieces were coming together, but as he merged onto the highway, he noticed headlights in his mirror. Maintaining distance but staying present. The black sedan was back. Warren's hands tightened on the wheel. Let them follow. He wasn't stopping now. Warren returned to Millbrook as darkness fell, the black sedan maintaining its distance for the entire drive. When he pulled into the motel parking lot, the sedan drove past slowly, then disappeared around the corner. The message was clear. They knew where he was staying, knew his movements. They wanted him to feel watched. He sat in his car for a moment, considering his options. The motel room no longer felt safe. The hangar was isolated, but at least it had space to see anyone approaching. He decided to spend the night there instead. But first, he needed to secure the most important documents. The evidence he'd gathered: Raymond's journal, the classified mission reports. The decoded entries was too valuable to risk losing. If someone broke into his room again, or into the hangar, he needed backups in a place they couldn't reach. Warren drove to the only bank still open in downtown Millbrook, a regional branch that closed at 6. He arrived with 10 minutes to spare and requested access to a safety deposit box. The clerk, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes, processed the paperwork without much interest. Within 15 minutes, Warren had secured the original journal, the most damning classified documents, and Hugh Brennan's unsent confession letter in a steel box deep in the bank's vault. He kept copies of everything in the canvas bag. If someone wanted to search his belongings, they'd find something, just not the originals. Back at the motel, Warren packed his few possessions quickly. As he carried his bag to the car, he noticed a man standing near the ice machine, watching him. The man was in his 50s, wearing an expensive wool coat that looked out of place in working-class Millbrook. Their eyes met briefly before the man turned and walked away. Warren drove straight to the hangar, checking his mirrors constantly. No headlights followed this time, but that didn't ease his tension. They knew where the hangar was. They'd probably already been inside. He unlocked the main doors and pulled his car inside before closing them again. The jet loomed in the darkness until Warren found the light switches. The overhead fluorescents flickered to life, casting harsh white light across the space. Warren set up a makeshift workspace at the workbench, spreading out the cockpit documents. He had 2 days before Fiona arrived. 2 days to organize everything into a coherent narrative she can investigate and publish. He started creating a timeline, writing dates and events on a legal pad he'd found in Raymond's desk. March 1952, Project Sentinel begins. January 1965, Hugh Brennan shows signs of financial trouble. September 1966, Paul Hollis and Jack Kendrick killed in compromised mission. October 1966, Raymond reports Hugh. Investigation opened and closed. December 1968, Project Sentinel shut down. The pattern was clear. Hugh's betrayal had killed 2 pilots and destroyed Raymond's career. The military had protected Hugh to avoid scandal. Raymond had spent 40 years maintaining evidence of crimes that were never punished. Warren's phone buzzed. A text from Fiona. Just finished background research on Cold War aviation programs. This is bigger than I thought. See you day after tomorrow. Stay safe. He typed back. Found the pilot who betrayed them. Name is Hugh Brennan. Still alive. Her response came quickly. Do not approach him. Seriously, Warren, let me handle this the right way. Warren set the phone down, but his mind was already working. Hugh Brennan lived an hour away, had lived comfortably for decades while Raymond suffered in isolation. Part of Warren wanted to confront the man, to make him face what he'd done, but Fiona was right. Confrontation wasn't the answer. Exposure was. He spent the next hour going through maintenance logs, discovering just how meticulous Raymond had been. The F-86 had been serviced regularly until 5 years ago. Oil changes, part replacements, even a complete engine overhaul in 2005. Raymond had kept the jet flight ready for decades, long after Project Sentinel ended. Why? Insurance? Evidence? Or hope that someday he'd fly it again? Prove what he'd been part of. Warren climbed up to the cockpit and sat in the pilot's seat. The leather was cracked but still sturdy. He put his hands on the control stick, imagining Raymond sitting here, preparing for missions that officially never happened. Imagining his father in an identical cockpit, unaware that his next flight would be his last. The rage Warren felt was cold and focused. His father had died serving his country, and the country had lied about how he died. Raymond had tried to seek justice and been silenced. Decades of betrayal and cover-up, all to protect one man with the right connections. Warren climbed down from the cockpit and returned to the workbench. He noticed something he'd missed before: a sealed envelope taped to the underside of the desk drawer. He carefully peeled it free and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, an official military document on letterhead from the Department of Defense, Office of Special Investigations. The document was dated November 1966, 2 months after his father's death. Investigation file. Project Sentinel Security BRGH case number 66BSB0847. Subject: Major Hugh A. Brennan. USAF allegation: unauthorized disclosure of classified information to foreign agents. Status: investigation opened. The 15th of October 1966. Preliminary findings indicate possible contact between subject and individuals of interest. Evidence includes financial records showing unexplained deposits, witness testimony from Captain Warren Hollis regarding suspicious behavior, and timeline correlations between subject's knowledge and subsequent mission compromises. Case closed. The 8th of November 1966. Determination: insufficient evidence to proceed. All allegations deemed unsubstantiated. No further action recommended. The document was stamped at the bottom. Eyes only CLSSified to Warren stared at the signatures. The investigating officer's name was redacted, but the signature of the commanding officer who closed the case was still visible. Colonel Herbert Brennan. Hugh's uncle. The fix had been in from the start. Family protecting family, regardless of truth or justice. Warren photographed the document with his phone, then added it to his organized evidence pile. This was the smoking gun proof that an investigation had been opened. then deliberately shut down by Hugh's own relative. His phone rang, startling him. Unknown number. Warren answered cautiously. "Hello?" A man's voice, calm and professional. "Mr. Hollis, you're pursuing something that doesn't concern you. Who is this?" "Someone who'd prefer this situation resolved quietly. Your uncle kept his secrets buried for 40 years. There's no reason to dig them up now. Whatever you think you found, it won't change anything. It happened a long time ago. 2 men died because someone betrayed them. That doesn't have a statute of limitations. You're thinking about this emotionally. That's understandable. One of those men was your father. But consider the consequences of going public. You'll destroy reputations, cause pain to families who've moved on. And for what? Revenge against an old man? Justice that comes 50 years too late? Justice is never too late." There was a pause. "You're unemployed, Mr. Hollis, recently divorced, living in your car before this inheritance. You're vulnerable right now. We could help with that. Make sure you land on your feet financially. All you need to do is sell the hangar, take the money, move on. Everyone wins. Everyone except my father and Jack Kendrick, who are still dead. Everyone except Raymond, who spent his life being told he was crazy for wanting the truth known. The offer stands for 24 hours. After that, things become more complicated. Think carefully about what you're willing to risk." The line went dead. Warren set the phone down, his hand shaking with anger. They were offering him money to stay quiet. The same tactics they'd probably used on others over the years. Silence bought with cash and threats. He wouldn't be silenced. Warren spent the rest of the night in the hangar, organizing documents, writing out testimony notes, preparing everything Fiona would need. He dozed fitfully in the car as dawn approached, waking to every sound outside Dot when morning came. He had one more thing to do before Fiona arrived. He needed to see Hugh Brennan's world, understand what he was up against. Warren locked the hangar and drove north toward Riverside, toward the man who destroyed his family and never paid for it. He wouldn't confront Hugh not yet, but he needed to see with his own eyes how betrayal had been rewarded while integrity had been punished. The contrast would fuel what came next. The drive to Riverside took Warren through increasingly affluent neighborhoods. Strip malls gave way to tree-lined streets, then to estates hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. He'd looked up Hugh Brennan's address online. Public records made it easy enough to find. The house sat on Lakeshore Drive, one of the most expensive streets in the county. Warren drove past slowly, taking it all in. The property was expansive, at least 5 acres, with manicured lawns sloping down to a private dock on the lake. The house itself was a colonial revival, white with black shutters, perfectly maintained. 3 luxury cars sat in the circular driveway, a Mercedes, a Lexus, and a vintage Corvette. This was what treason had bought. Comfort, security, respectability. Warren drove around the block and parked on a side street where he could see the property's front gate. He sat there for 20 minutes, watching. A gardening crew arrived and began working on the landscaping. A housekeeper's car pulled in through the gate. Everything moved with the smooth efficiency of wealth. His phone buzzed. Fiona. Just left. Should arrive by 2 p.m. Where should we meet? Warren typed back. The hangar. I'll text you the address. He took one last look at Hugh Brennan's mansion, memorizing every detail. Then he drove back to Millbrook, anger simmering beneath a calm surface. Fiona would arrive in a few hours. The real work could begin. Back at the hangar, Warren used the time to clean up the space. He swept dust, organized the workbench, made sure everything was presentable. The jet needed to look impressive. It was the physical proof of everything Raymond had preserved. Fiona's rental car pulled up just after 2. Warren watched through the window as she stepped out. She looked much the same as he remembered, though her dark hair was shorter now and she wore professional attire that spoke of success. She'd always been sharp-driven, the kind of person who asked uncomfortable questions and refused to accept easy answers. Warren opened the hangar doors. Fiona stopped in her tracks when she saw the jet, her eyes widening. "Holy hell, Warren. You weren't exaggerating. Come inside. There's a lot to show you." For the next 2 hours, Warren walked Fiona through everything. He showed her the documents, explained the timeline, played sections of Raymond's audio recording about Paul's death. Fiona took notes constantly, photographed documents, asked pointed questions about dates and details. "This is incredible," she said finally, leaning against the workbench. "If even half of this checks out, it's a major story. Cold War betrayal, military cover-up, families lied to for decades." She looked at Warren. "But we need more than Raymond's word. We need corroboration. I have it. Floyd Kensington, one of the original pilots. He's willing to go on record. He confirmed everything, gave me Hugh Brennan's name." Fiona's eyes lit up. "A living witness. That's huge. We'll need to interview him, get everything documented." She flipped through her notes. "I've already started researching Project Sentinel. There are references to it in declassified documents, but details are sparse. Most files are still sealed. But if we can prove Hugh Brennan was part of the program and that he compromised it, we have a story." "There's one more piece," Warren said. He pulled out his phone and showed her the photo of the investigation document. Hugh's uncle closed the investigation. Family protecting family. Fiona studied the image, then looked up at Warren with something like admiration. "You've built a solid case here. Better than I expected. But Warren, you need to understand what happens next. When we publish this, it's going to explode. Hugh Brennan's family will come after us with everything they have. Lawsuits, pressure on my editors, attempts to discredit the story. They'll dig into your life, my life, looking for anything to undermine our credibility. I know. Do you? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back. Your life becomes public. Every mistake, every vulnerability, it's all fair game." Warren thought about his divorce, his unemployment, the 3 weeks he'd lived in his car. None of it mattered compared to this. My father died because Hugh Brennan sold him out. Raymond spent 40 years trying to make it right. I'm not walking away. Fiona nodded slowly. "Okay, then we do this properly. First, I interview Floyd Kensington tomorrow. I'll bring recording equipment, get everything on the record. Then I'll start reaching out to military historians, other veterans who might remember Project Sentinel. I'll file Freedom of Information requests for any declassified documents related to the program. We build an airtight case before we publish." "How long will that take?" "A week, maybe 2. I know you want this out there now, but rushing helps no one. We get one shot at this. If we publish and the story falls apart because we missed something, Hugh Brennan walks away clean and we lose credibility forever." Warren understood the logic, but impatience gnawed at him. Still, Fiona was right. They needed to be thorough. "There's something else you should know," Warren said. He told her about the phone call, the offer of money, the veiled threats. Fiona's expression darkened. "They're trying to buy you off. When that doesn't work, they'll escalate. You need to be careful. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't take meetings with strangers. And for God's sake, don't confront Hugh Brennan directly." "I won't. I'm serious, Warren. Men like Hugh don't get to live comfortable lives after committing treason unless they have powerful friends. Those friends will protect him." As if summoning them with words, Warren heard a car approaching. He moved to the window and saw a dark SUV pulling up outside the hangar. 2 men in suits stepped out. "We have company," Warren said. Fiona joined him at the window. "Who are they?" "No idea, but I don't think they're here to chat." The men approached the open hangar doors. The first was in his 50s, gray-haired, with the bearing of someone used to authority. The second was younger, harder, with eyes that constantly scanned the surroundings. "Warren Hollis?" The older man said. "I'm Dale Thornton, attorney for the Brennan family. This is my associate. We'd like a word." Warren stepped forward, positioning himself between the men and Fiona. "About what?" "About the property you inherited and certain items it contains. Items that may be government property, classified materials that should have been returned to military custody decades ago. My clients are prepared to facilitate that return and compensate you appropriately." "Your clients," Fiona said, stepping up beside Warren. "That would be Hugh Brennan's family?" Thornton's eyes narrowed as he looked at Fiona. "And you are?" "Fiona Templeton, investigative journalist. I'm here researching a story about Project Sentinel and the 1966 deaths of Paul Hollis and Jack Kendrick." Thornton's expression didn't change, but Warren saw the slight tensing of his shoulders. "Those events are classified. Any discussion of them would violate federal law. The families have a right to know how their loved ones died," Fiona said calmly, "especially when those deaths resulted from treason. That's a serious accusation, Miss Templeton. One you'd be wise not to repeat without substantial proof." "We have proof," Warren said. "Documents, testimony, evidence of a cover-up. It's all going public." Thornton was quiet for a moment, his gaze moving between Warren and Fiona, then to the jet behind them. "Mr. Hollis, Miss Templeton, you're playing a dangerous game. The materials in this hangar are classified government property. Possessing them is a federal crime. Discussing them publicly is a federal crime. My clients would prefer to resolve this quietly, but they're prepared to pursue legal action if necessary." "Let them try," Fiona said. "I have a team of lawyers who specialize in First Amendment cases. We're very comfortable in that territory." Thornton reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, which he handed to Warren. "The offer of compensation stands. 24 hours. After that, we pursue other remedies. I strongly suggest you consider your position carefully." The two men turned and walked back to their SUV. Warren and Fiona watched them drive away. "Well," Fiona said, "that was a clear threat. They're scared." "That's good. Scared people are dangerous, Warren. We need to move fast now. They'll try to get a court order seizing these documents. We need everything copied, backed up, and distributed before that happens." Warren nodded. "Let's get to work." Warren and Fiona spent the rest of the afternoon creating multiple copies of every document. Fiona uploaded encrypted files to secure cloud storage. Warren made physical copies that he planned to distribute to multiple locations. They worked methodically, knowing that time was running out. By evening, they'd secured everything. Fiona left to check into a motel and prepare for the next day's interview with Floyd. Warren stayed at the hangar, unwilling to leave the jet unguarded. As darkness fell, Warren walked around the aircraft one more time, running his hand along the fuselage. Raymond had maintained this jet for 40 years, keeping it ready, keeping the truth alive. Warren felt the weight of that dedication, the loneliness of Raymond's vigil. He climbed into the cockpit and sat in the pilot's seat. The instrument panel gleamed dully in the overhead lights. Warren reached out and touched the controls, trying to imagine what it had been like flying classified missions, trusting your fellow pilots with your life, knowing that one betrayal could end everything. His hand brushed against the radio panel, and he noticed something odd. The panel was slightly loose, not quite flush with the dashboard. Warren wiggled it gently. It moved more than it should. He pulled harder, and the panel came free in his hands. Behind it was a hollow space in the console, barely visible. And inside that space, wrapped in plastic, was something Warren had almost missed. A cassette tape. Warren's heart began to race. He climbed down from the cockpit carefully, carrying the tape like it was made of glass. He remembered seeing an old cassette player in Raymond's workbench. It took him several minutes to find it, buried under boxes of spare parts. The player was dusty, but functional. Warren plugged it in, his hands trembling slightly. He unwrapped the cassette and saw a label written in Raymond's careful handwriting. For Warren, play this when you're ready to know. Warren pressed play. Static. Then his uncle's voice, older and wearier than Warren remembered. Warren, if you're hearing this, you found everything. The jet, the documents, the truth about what happened. I'm proud of you for digging this far. Most people would have sold the hangar and walked away. Warren sat down heavily on a stool, his eyes locked on the tape player. I recorded this 3 months ago, Raymond continued. The doctors say my heart's giving out. Could be weeks, could be months. Either way, I won't see another year. I've made my peace with that. But there's something I need you to know. Something I couldn't tell you while I was alive. Something that changes everything. Warren leaned forward, barely breathing. Your father, Paul, my brother. You were told he died in a car accident when you were 6 years old. That was a lie, but you know that now. You've read the flight logs. You know he died flying a classified mission that was compromised by Hugh Brennan's betrayal. Raymond's voice broke slightly. But what you don't know, what I've never told anyone, is this: Paul wasn't just another pilot in the squadron. He was part of my flight crew. We flew together, Warren. We were a team. The 5 of us. Me, Paul, Floyd Kensington, Jack Kendrick, and Hugh Brennan. Warren's vision blurred. His father and Raymond had flown together, had been part of the same unit. The mission that killed Paul, the one Hugh compromised, I was supposed to fly it too. It was supposed to be me and Paul, flying wing formation like we always did. But 2 days before the mission, I came down with pneumonia. Command grounded me, assigned Jack Kendrick to fly Paul's wing instead. Raymond's voice grew thick with emotion. Paul and Jack flew the mission without me. And when Hugh's betrayal caught up with them, when they were ambushed over Canadian wilderness, I was in a hospital bed 200 miles away. I couldn't protect my brother. I couldn't save him. And for 45 years, I've carried that guilt. Warren felt tears running down his face. Your mother never knew the truth. She thought Paul died in a car accident, and I let her believe it because that's what command ordered. I went to the funeral and stood there knowing how my brother really died, knowing who was responsible, and I couldn't say a word. When I tried to get justice, they forced me out. They protected Hugh because his family had power, and they destroyed my credibility because I didn't. Raymond paused, and Warren could hear him breathing heavily on the recording. I kept this jet as evidence, kept all the documents, kept everything hidden and safe, waiting for the day when someone would care enough to expose the truth. I always hoped it would be you, Warren. You deserve to know that Paul was a hero. He died serving his country, flying missions that kept people safe, even though they'd never know about it. He deserves to be honored for that. Another pause, longer this time. But here's what I need you to understand. This isn't just about justice for Paul anymore. This is about you, about your family, about the truth you have a right to know. Your father didn't die in some random accident. He died because someone betrayed him, and the system protected that betrayer. For 40 years, Hugh Brennan has lived comfortably while Paul's memory was buried under lies. Raymond's voice hardened with determination. Finish what I couldn't, son. Expose Hugh Brennan. Make the world know what Paul sacrificed. Make sure your father's name is spoken with honor instead of whispered in half-truths. You have everything you need. The evidence is solid. The truth is on your side. Don't let them silence you the way they silenced me. The recording quality wavered, then Raymond's voice came back softer. I'm sorry I was distant when you were growing up. I'm sorry I couldn't be the uncle you deserved. The guilt of losing Paul, the burden of knowing the truth, it ate at me every day. I withdrew because I didn't know how to be around you without breaking down, without telling you everything. I hope you can forgive me for that. A long silence, then Raymond's final words. Your father loved you, Warren. In the short time he had with you, he loved you completely. He talked about you constantly, showed everyone pictures, made plans for your future. When he died, the world lost a good man, and you lost a father who would have been proud of the man you became. Make him proud now. Tell his story. Let the world know Paul Hollis was a hero. The recording ended with a soft click. Warren sat in the silence of the hangar, tears streaming freely now. His father and Raymond had flown together, had been brothers not just in blood, but in service. Raymond had carried the guilt of surviving when Paul didn't, had spent 40 years protecting evidence of betrayal while tormented by memories. Everything Warren had discovered, the jet, the documents, the truth, Raymond had preserved it all specifically for him. His uncle had known that someday Warren would inherit the hangar, would find everything, would have the chance to finish what Raymond couldn't. Warren picked up his father's dog tags, which he'd been wearing around his neck since Floyd gave them to him. He held them tightly, feeling the metal warm against his palm. I'll finish it, he whispered to the empty hangar. I promise. For you and for him. He stood and walked to the jet, placing his hand on the fuselage. This aircraft had been his father's and Raymond's. They both sat in this cockpit, both flown classified missions that officially never happened. The jet was more than evidence now. It was a memorial to both of them. Warren pulled out his phone and called Fiona. I found something, he said when she answered. A recording Raymond left for me. Fiona, my father and Raymond flew together. They were part of the same crew. Raymond was supposed to fly the mission that killed my father, but he was grounded with pneumonia. He's been living with survivor's guilt for 40 years. Fiona was quiet for a moment. Warren, this changes the emotional center of the story. This isn't just about justice for Raymond anymore. It's about a brother trying to honor his brother's memory, and a son finally learning who his father really was. I know. And that makes it even more important that we get this right. Hugh Brennan didn't just betray fellow pilots. He killed my father. Raymond spent his entire life trying to make that known. I won't let that be for nothing. We won't, Fiona said firmly. Tomorrow I interview Floyd. Then we move fast. We publish within the week. Warren ended the call and looked around the hangar one more time. Everything had changed. This wasn't just a mission for justice anymore. It was personal in ways he hadn't fully understood before. His father had been murdered by betrayal. Raymond had died trying to expose it. Now, it was Warren's turn to carry the torch forward, and he wouldn't fail them. Morning came with cold rain. Warren barely slept, his mind replaying Raymond's recording throughout the night. The revelation that his father and uncle had flown together, that Raymond had carried survivor's guilt for decades, it reframed everything. This wasn't just about exposing corruption. It was about honoring two men who'd been denied the recognition they deserved. Fiona arrived at the hangar at 8, carrying camera equipment and her laptop. Ready to visit Floyd? More than ready. They took Fiona's rental car, leaving Warren's Subaru at the hangar. The drive to Pinecrest Veterans Home took them through sheets of rain that hammered the windshield. Fiona drove carefully while Warren sat in the passenger seat, organizing his thoughts. I've been doing research, Fiona said. Hugh Brennan is 76 years old. Retired from a consulting firm 20 years ago. Sits on 3 corporate boards. His wife died in 2015. He has 2 adult children, both lawyers. The family's been prominent in state politics for 3 generations. That's why he was protected. Exactly. His father was Senator Arnold Brennan. His uncle was a colonel. When Raymond tried to expose Hugh, he was fighting an entire system designed to protect people like the Brennans. Warren watched the rain. How do we beat that? With truth and documentation. We make the evidence so overwhelming that no amount of influence can suppress it. We publish everything simultaneously, The story, the documents, the interviews. We make it too big to bury. They arrived at Pinecrest and found Floyd waiting in his room this time, dressed in his old Air Force uniform. The uniform hung loosely on his thin frame, but he wore it with unmistakable pride. "Thought I should look proper for this," Floyd said. "If I'm going to tell the truth after 50 years of silence, I should do it right." Fiona set up her camera while Warren arranged chairs. For the next 90 minutes, Floyd told his story. He spoke clearly, methodically, laying out the history of Project Sentinel, the pilots involved, Hugh's suspicious behavior, and the betrayal that killed Paul and Jack. He described the investigation that was opened and closed within weeks, the pressure on witnesses to stay quiet, the way Raymond was forced out for refusing to let the matter drop. Raymond Hollis was the most honest man I ever knew, Floyd said directly to the camera. He tried to do right by his brother, and the system destroyed him for it. That's the truth, and I'm ashamed it took me this long to say it publicly. When the interview finished, Floyd looked exhausted but relieved. "Will this make a difference?" "It will," Fiona assured him. "Your testimony corroborates everything in the documents. This gives the story credibility no one can dismiss." They said goodbye to Floyd and drove back toward Millbrook. Fiona was energized, already planning the article structure. "I'll reach out to my editor today. Get approval for a multi-part series. This is too big for one article." Warren's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Hello? Mr. Hollis, this is Commander Phyllis Hendrick from the Department of Defense, Military Criminal Investigation Command. I need to speak with you about materials you may have in your possession related to classified Cold War operations." Warren's pulse quickened. "How did you get this number?" "Mr. Hollis, I'm not calling to threaten you. I'm calling because certain parties have filed complaints alleging you possess classified documents. I've been assigned to investigate. I need to determine if those documents should be returned to military custody or if they've been properly declassified. What if I told you those documents prove a cover-up? That they show how the military protected a traitor who got 2 pilots killed?" There was a pause. "Then I'd say I need to see those documents. Mr. Hollis, I'm a criminal investigator. My job is to determine the truth, not to protect anyone. If you have evidence of wrongdoing, I want to see it. But I need to follow proper protocol." Warren glanced at Fiona, who was listening intently. "I'll send you copies of everything, but I'm not turning over the originals until I know they won't disappear into some classified vault." "Fair enough. Send me what you have. I'll review it and be in touch." Warren ended the call and looked at Fiona. "Military Criminal Investigation Command wants the documents." "That could be good or bad," Fiona said. "If they're legitimate, they might actually investigate. If they're there to protect the Brennans, they'll try to seize everything and classify it again. We need to publish before they can stop us." "Agreed. I'll push my editor for fast-track approval. We go live in 4 days." They reached Millbrook and stopped at a diner for lunch. As they ate, Fiona outlined the publication strategy. First, article establishes Project Sentinel and the 1966 mission that killed your father. Second article reveals Hugh Brennan's betrayal and the cover-up. Third article is Floyd's testimony and your uncle's decades-long quest for justice. We released them over 3 consecutive days maximum impact. Warren nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. 4 days felt like an eternity. Anything could happen in 4 days. After lunch, they returned to the hangar. Warren showed Fiona the cassette recording, playing Raymond's confession about survivors' guilt. Fiona listened with tears in her eyes. "This is the heart of the story," she said quietly. "A brother's love, a son's quest for truth. This is what makes it resonate beyond just another military scandal." Warren's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop now or face consequences. Final warning." He showed it to Fiona. She photographed the message. "Document everything. These threats become part of the story. That evening, Fiona left to begin writing. Warren stayed at the hangar, unable to shake the feeling that time was running out. He uploaded encrypted copies of all documents to 3 different cloud services. He emailed copies to Fiona, to Floyd, and to his own rarely used personal email account. As darkness fell, Warren heard vehicles approaching. Multiple vehicles. He moved to the window and saw 3 SUVs pulling up outside. Men in suits emerged, along with 2 uniformed military police officers. Dale Thornton stepped forward, holding papers. "Mr. Hollis, I have a court order authorizing seizure of all classified materials on this property. Please open the doors." Warren's jaw tightened. They'd moved faster than he expected. He stepped outside, pulling the hangar door closed behind him. "Those documents belong to my uncle. They're part of his estate. They're classified government property," Thornton said. "This order gives us legal authority to retrieve them. You can cooperate or be arrested for obstruction. Your choice." Warren glanced at the military police officers. They looked uncomfortable but ready to follow orders. He had no legal ground to stand on, not yet. "Fine, take them. But you should know copies have already been distributed. You can't suppress this." Thornton's expression flickered with frustration. "We'll see about that." Warren unlocked the hangar and stepped aside. The men entered and began systematically gathering documents. They photographed everything, logged every item, worked with professional efficiency. Warren watched as 40 years of Raymond's careful preservation was cataloged and boxed. But they didn't know about the safety deposit box. Didn't know about the cloud backups. Didn't know that the most damning documents were already beyond their reach. After 2 hours, they finished. Thornton handed Warren a receipt listing everything seized. "You'll be contacted about the aircraft. It may also be government property subject to seizure. The jet belongs to my family. That's not your decision to make." They loaded everything into the SUVs and drove away, leaving Warren standing in the empty hangar. The workbench was bare. The documents were gone. Only the jet remained, silent and imposing. Warren pulled out his phone and called Fiona. "They seized everything from the hangar. Court order." "Doesn't matter," Fiona said. "I have copies of everything." "So do you. They can't stop publication now. We're going live tomorrow morning instead of waiting. My editor just approved it. The story runs at 6 a.m. Warren felt something settle in his chest, determination mixed with relief. Tomorrow morning, Fiona confirmed. "Get some rest, Warren. By this time tomorrow, the whole world will know what Hugh Brennan did." Warren stood alone in the hangar, looking at the jet. Raymond's promise was about to be fulfilled. His father's story was about to be told. Justice, delayed for 50 years, was finally coming. Warren didn't sleep that night. He sat in his car outside the hangar, watching the eastern sky gradually lighten from black to deep blue to pale gray. At 5:45, his phone buzzed. A text from Fiona. "Article is live. Link coming." 30 seconds later, the link appeared. Warren clicked it and watched the page load. Cold War treason buried for 50 years. The betrayal of Project SNTINLT. Fiona Templeton. The article began with Paul Hollis's death, how the family had been told it was a car accident, how the truth had been classified and hidden. Then it detailed Project Sentinel, the covert missions, the pilots who flew them in secret. Fiona had woven Floyd's testimony throughout, giving the story authenticity and emotional weight. The second half focused on Hugh Brennan, his gambling debts, his suspicious behavior, the evidence Raymond had compiled, the investigation that was opened and closed within weeks by Hugh's own uncle, the decades of silence that followed. Warren read every word, tears blurring his vision. His father's name was there, his service documented, his sacrifice acknowledged. Raymond's decades-long vigil was explained with compassion and respect. The article ended with a simple statement. Captain Raymond Hollis died in October, believing his brother's story would remain buried forever. He was wrong. This is for Paul Hollis, Jack Kendrick, and every family that deserves to know the truth. Warren's phone began ringing immediately. News outlets calling, asking for interviews. He ignored them all and called Fiona. "It's live," she said, her voice tight with excitement. "Already trending on social media. My editor says traffic is through the roof." "Thank you," Warren managed, "for everything. We're not done yet. Part 2 publishes tomorrow. But Warren, prepare yourself. This is going to get intense." She was right. Within an hour, national news networks picked up the story. By 8 o'clock, Warren's phone was flooded with interview requests, messages from veterans groups, calls from lawyers offering pro bono representation. The Millbrook Diners television was tuned to cable news, where military analysts discussed Project Sentinel's historical significance. Warren drove into town and stopped at a coffee shop. People recognized him from the article's photos. Some offered congratulations, others simply nodded with respect. But there was also hostility, people who resented the attention, who thought Warren should have left the past buried. At noon, Hugh Brennan's lawyers released a statement. Warren read it on his phone. "The allegations made by Miss Templeton are false and defamatory. Mr. Brennan served his country with honor and distinction. These baseless accusations, made 50 years after the alleged events, rely on unreliable testimony from a man suffering from dementia and forged documents. We will pursue all legal remedies against those responsible for this character assassination." Warren felt cold anger reading it. They were calling Floyd demented, calling Raymond's carefully preserved evidence forgeries. The Brennan family playbook hadn't changed in 50 years. Deny, discredit, destroy. But this time, they were facing more than Raymond's lone voice. This time, the evidence was public, verified, and spreading faster than they could contain it. His phone rang. "Commander Hendrick from Military Criminal Investigation." Warren answered. "Mr. Hollis, I've reviewed the documents you sent. I've also read Miss Templeton's article. I need you to know that my office is opening a formal investigation into the allegations against Hugh Brennan." Warren's heart leaped. "You're investigating?" "We are. The evidence you provided is substantial. The original 1966 investigation appears to have been improperly closed. We'll be conducting a thorough review, including interviews with surviving witnesses and examination of all available records. This investigation will be independent and complete." "Will Hugh Brennan face charges?" "That depends on what we find. But Mr. Hollis, I want to be clear. Your uncle was right to preserve this evidence. What happened to Captain Paul Hollis and Captain Jack Kendrick deserves proper investigation. Your father deserves justice." Warren thanked her and ended the call. Justice was finally coming. After 50 years, the military was taking Raymond's accusations seriously. That afternoon, Warren drove to the hangar and found a crowd outside. News crews, cameras, reporters shouting questions. He pushed through without commenting and locked himself inside with the jet. Alone in the dim space, Warren climbed into the cockpit one more time. He sat in his father's seat, his uncle's seat, and closed his eyes. The chaos outside faded. For a moment, it was just Warren and the ghosts of the men who'd sat here before him. "I did it," he whispered. "The truth is out. Everyone knows now." His phone buzzed. A message from a number he didn't recognize, but the area code was local. He opened it and found a photo of his daughter Annie holding up a newspaper with Fiona's article on the front page. Below the photo, a message. "Dad, I saw the news. I'm so proud of you. Can we talk?" Warren's hand shook. He and Annie hadn't spoken in 8 months, not since the divorce shattered their family. She'd been angry, hurt, distant. He'd tried reaching out, but she'd needed space. Now she wanted to talk. Warren climbed down from the cockpit and stepped outside. Ignoring the reporters, he got in his car and drove to a quiet spot by the lake. Then called Annie Dodd. She answered on the second ring. "Dad?" "Annie, it's so good to hear your voice. I've been watching the news all day. Everyone's talking about Grandpa Paul and Uncle Raymond. I can't believe we never knew the truth. I didn't know either until a few weeks ago. Finding out changed everything. You must have been so angry, learning your father didn't die the way you were told." I am. But mostly I'm just grateful I finally know who he really was. He was a hero, Annie. So was Raymond. And they both deserved better than silence. They talked for 20 minutes, carefully at first, then more naturally. Annie told him about college, her new apartment, her boyfriend. Warren told her about finding the jet, decoding Raymond's journal, meeting Floyd. It felt like reconnecting with someone he'd lost and found again. "I want to see the hangar," Annie said. "And the jet. I want to see what Grandpa Paul and Uncle Raymond were part of. Come visit. Anytime. I'd love that." "I will." "Dad, I'm sorry I shut you out after the divorce. It wasn't fair to you. You needed time. I understand. I'm just glad we're talking now." After they hung up, Warren sat by the lake watching the water. His daughter wanted to reconnect. His father's story was being told. Raymond's mission was complete. Despite everything, the divorce, the job loss, the weeks living in his car, Warren felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Connection. Peace. His phone rang again. Fiona. "Warren, turn on the news." Any channel. Warren pulled up a news app on his phone. Every major outlet was carrying the same story. Military opens investigation into Cold War treason allegations. The Department of Defense had released an official statement confirming Commander Hendrick's investigation. They were reviewing all evidence related to Hugh Brennan's alleged betrayal, reopening the 1966 case, and examining why the original investigation had been improperly closed. "They're taking it seriously," Fiona said. "Warren, this is huge. We forced their hand." Warren watched the coverage, seeing Floyd's face flash across screens, seeing photos of the F-86, seeing his own face identified as Paul Hollis's son. The story had grown beyond anything he'd imagined. Veterans groups were calling for full disclosure. Congressional representatives were demanding hearings. The Brennan family's denials were being drowned out by a tide of public demand for truth. Raymond had been right. The evidence had survived. The truth had mattered. And now, finally, justice was possible. 2 weeks after Fiona's article published, Commander Hendrick called Warren with news. "Mr. Hollis, our investigation has concluded. We've confirmed that Hugh Brennan did compromise classified missions in 1966, resulting in the deaths of Captains Paul Hollis and Jack Hendrick. We've also confirmed that the original investigation was improperly terminated by Colonel Herbert Brennan to protect his nephew." Warren gripped the phone tightly. "What happens now?" "We're recommending criminal charges. Treason doesn't have a statute of limitations. The Justice Department will make the final decision on prosecution, but our evidence is substantial. We're also recommending that Captain Raymond Hollis and Captain Paul Hollis be posthumously recognized for their service and integrity." Recognized how? Full military honors. Their names will be added to the memorial wall at the Air Force Academy. Their service records will be corrected to reflect the classified nature of their work. And we're recommending both receive posthumous Distinguished Service Medals. Warren's vision blurred with tears. "Thank you. Thank you for taking this seriously. Your uncle did the right thing preserving that evidence. So did you in bringing it forward. The Air Force owes your family an apology for how Captain Hollis and his brother were treated." The call ended, and Warren immediately drove to Pinecrest to tell Floyd. The old pilot wept openly when he heard the news. Raymond can rest now. So can Paul. Justice took 50 years, but it's here. 3 days later, Hugh Brennan was formally indicted on charges of treason, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The news broke during the morning cycle, and by afternoon, footage showed Hugh being led from his lakeside mansion in handcuffs. His face was pale, aged, defeated. Warren watched the coverage from the diner in Millbrook. The townspeople who'd once mocked his inheritance now bought him coffee and shook his hand. He'd become something he never intended, a local hero who'd stood up to power, and one. Fiona arrived that evening, fresh from covering Hugh's arraignment. He's being held without bail. Flight risk. The prosecution's case is airtight. They have everything from Raymond's records, plus testimony from 3 other surviving Project Sentinel pilots who corroborated Floyd's account. Will he go to trial? His lawyers are already talking plea deal. Hugh's 76, in poor health. He'll likely accept a prison term in exchange for avoiding a public trial. Either way, he'll die in custody. That's justice, Warren. They sat in the hangar that night, looking at the jet. Warren had fought off the government's attempt to seize it. Commander Hendrick had intervened, confirming the aircraft was legally Raymond's property, and therefore Warren's inheritance. I've been talking to the National Air and Space Museum, Warren said. They want the jet for a new Cold War exhibit. They'll display it with full documentation of Project Sentinel, Raymond's story, my father's service, everything preserved for history. Raymond would love that. I think he would. The jet served its purpose. It kept the truth alive. Now it can help tell that truth to future generations. Warren pulled out the brass compass Floyd had given him, turning it over in his hands. True north. Raymond had spent 40 years staying true to his course, never wavering despite opposition, isolation, and doubt. I've been thinking about what comes next, Warren said quietly. For me, I found my father's story, got justice for Raymond. But my own life is still a mess. Unemployed, divorced, no idea what I'm doing. Fiona smiled gently. You're rebuilding. That's what you're doing. And Warren, you're already not the man who drove into Millbrook a month ago. That man was lost, broken, living in his car. This man finished something important. This man reconnected with his daughter. This man stood up to powerful people and won. I got lucky. Found something worth fighting for. You created something worth fighting for. You could have sold the hangar, taken the money, walked away. Instead, you chose the hard path. That wasn't luck. That was character. A few days later, Warren attended a ceremony at the Millbrook Town Hall. The mayor officially apologized on behalf of the town for how Raymond had been treated, for dismissing his accusations, for letting him live in isolation and scorn. A plaque was unveiled honoring both Raymond and Paul Hollis for their service to the nation. Floyd attended in his uniform, frail but proud. Annie came, meeting Warren at the ceremony and hugging him tightly. I'm proud of you, Dad. Grandpa Paul and Uncle Raymond would be too. After the ceremony, Warren stood with Annie and Floyd looking at the plaque. Raymond's and Paul's names were engraved in bronze, along with the words, "These men served with honor and silence, and sought truth when others chose comfort. Their legacy endures." It's not enough, Warren said quietly. A plaque doesn't replace 40 years of Raymond's isolation or the lies told about my father. No, Floyd agreed. But it's acknowledgement. It's the beginning of remembering them properly. That matters more than you might think. That evening, Warren received a call from the Brennan family's attorneys. They wanted to settle a financial payment to Warren in exchange for his agreement not to pursue civil litigation. The amount was substantial, enough to stabilize Warren's life, provide security he hadn't had in years. Warren thought about it for exactly 30 seconds before declining. This was never about money. It was about truth and honor. Tell the Brennans they can keep their guilt payment. Fiona, hearing about the declined offer, laughed. You're either principled or crazy. Maybe both. Definitely both. Warren spent his final evening at the hangar, preparing the jet for transport to the museum. He cleaned it carefully, polishing the fuselage until it gleamed. He arranged Raymond's photographs and the silver pilot wings in a display case that would accompany the aircraft as he worked. He thought about everything that had happened. A month ago, he'd been directionless, defeated, convinced his best years were behind him. Now he'd uncovered his family's hidden history, exposed decades of injustice, and reconnected with his daughter. Raymond's inheritance had been more than a building and an aircraft. It had been purpose, mission, redemption. Warren climbed into the cockpit one final time and sat in the pilot's seat. He placed his hands on the controls, closed his eyes, and felt the presence of the men who'd sat here before him. His father, preparing for missions that would never be acknowledged. Raymond, maintaining this aircraft through decades of solitude, keeping faith that truth would eventually matter. Mission accomplished, Warren whispered. You can rest now. Both of you. He climbed down, turned off the lights, and locked the hangar doors behind him. Tomorrow, the transport team would arrive to move the jet to Washington. Tomorrow, this chapter would close. But tonight, Warren stood under cold stars and felt something he thought he'd lost forever. The sense that his life had meaning, that his actions mattered, that he'd honored the people who came before him. Thought justice had taken 50 years, but it had finally arrived. 3 months later, Warren stood in the National Air and Space Museum, watching visitors gather around the F-86 Sabre. The jet gleamed under carefully positioned lights, its silver fuselage polished to perfection. Beside it, a large display panel told the story of Project Sentinel, complete with photographs of the pilots, declassified mission logs, and excerpts from Raymond's journal. 2 names were prominently featured: Captain Paul Hollis and Captain Raymond Hollis. Annie stood beside Warren, reading the display for the 3rd time. It's perfect, Dad. Everyone who comes here will know what they did. That's all Raymond ever wanted. Just for people to know. The museum had done an exceptional job. The exhibit didn't shy away from Hugh Brennan's betrayal or the military's cover-up. It presented the full story, the heroism and the injustice, the sacrifice and the silence. Visitors moved through quietly, reading every word. Studying the photographs, Floyd had been too frail to travel for the opening, but Warren had video called him from the exhibit. The old pilot had wept seeing the jet displayed with such honor, seeing his friend's story finally told properly. I can die easy now, Floyd had said. We kept our promise to Raymond. The truth survived. Warren's phone buzzed. A message from Fiona. Hugh Brennan accepted plea deal. 20 years federal prison. He'll die behind bars. Warren showed the message to Annie. She read it and nodded slowly. Is that enough? 20 years for what he did? He's 76. 20 years is a life sentence. And more importantly, everyone knows what he did. His name will forever be associated with treason and betrayal. That might matter more than the prison time. They walked through the rest of the museum, but Warren's mind was elsewhere. He thought about the journey that had brought him here from a broken, unemployed man living in his car to someone who'd exposed a 50-year cover-up and restored his family's honor. The inheritance Raymond left him hadn't been the hangar or the jet. It had been purpose. Outside the museum, Washington's spring afternoon was bright and warm. Warren and Annie walked toward the National Mall, joining the crowds of tourists and students enjoying the weather. What's next for you? Annie asked. I've been offered a job. Military historian consultant. Helping families research classified service records, uncovering stories like Raymond's. It doesn't pay much, but it feels right. You'd be good at that. I hope so. I've also been looking at apartments here in Washington. Thought maybe I'd stay in the area, be closer to the museum, closer to you. Annie smiled. I'd like that. We lost a lot of time, Dad. I don't want to lose more. Neither do I. They sat on a bench overlooking the reflecting pool. Warren pulled out the brass compass Floyd had given him. He carried it everywhere now, a reminder of Raymond's unwavering direction. "I wish I'd known them," Annie said quietly. "Grandpa Paul and Uncle Raymond. Really known them, not just the distant memories or the stories told at Thanksgiving." "Me too. But in a way, I feel like I know them now better than I ever did when Raymond was alive. I know what they believed in, what they fought for, what they sacrificed. That's worth something. It's worth everything." Warren's phone rang. "Commander Hendrick." He answered. "Mr. Hollis, I wanted you to know the Air Force Academy ceremony is scheduled for next month. We'll be adding Captain Paul Hollis and Captain Raymond Hollis to the memorial wall. You and your family are invited to attend. We'll be there." "Thank you, Commander." "Thank you, Mr. Hollis. What you did bringing this to light, it reminded us why accountability matters, even decades later. Especially decades later." After the call, Warren and Annie sat in comfortable silence. The afternoon light turned golden, casting long shadows across the mall. Families played on the grass. Children chased each other around monuments. Life continued in all its ordinary beauty. Warren thought about Raymond spending 40 years in that hangar, maintaining the jet, preserving evidence, waiting for someone to care. The loneliness of that vigil was heartbreaking, but Raymond had never lost faith that truth mattered, that justice was worth pursuing even when it seemed impossible. "I used to think my life was over," Warren said. "After the divorce, losing my job, hitting rock bottom, I thought I'd used up all my chances. And now? Now I think maybe rock bottom was exactly where I needed to be. If I'd been comfortable, successful, secure, I might have sold the hangar without looking inside, might have walked away from the whole thing. Being broken made me willing to take risks, to care about something bigger than myself." Annie leaned her head on his shoulder. "Uncle Raymond knew what he was doing, leaving it to you." "Maybe he did?" They stayed until sunset, watching the sky turn orange and purple over the monuments. When they finally stood to leave, Warren took one last look toward the museum, toward the jet that had kept his family's secrets safe for half a century. Raymond's silver pilot wings were mounted beside the jet's cockpit, polished and gleaming. Paul's photograph showed a young man in uniform, smiling, unaware that his service would be hidden and his death lied about. But now their stories were told, their sacrifices acknowledged, their honor restored. Warren and Annie walked back through the city streets as lights began coming on in windows. They had dinner at a small Italian restaurant, talking about Annie's upcoming graduation, Warren's new job, the future they were rebuilding together. Later, alone in his modest hotel room, Warren opened his laptop and began writing. He'd been asked to contribute a piece for a veterans magazine about Project Sentinel and the importance of declassifying Cold War operations. The words came easily now. He wrote about Raymond's solitary vigil, about Floyd's courage in finally speaking truth, about the families who deserved to know how their loved ones really died. He wrote about the cost of secrecy and the value of accountability, even when it comes half a century late. But mostly he wrote about his father, a pilot who'd served in silence, who'd died protecting secrets he couldn't share, who'd loved his son in the brief time they had together. Paul Hollis had been denied recognition in life, but in death, his story would live on. Children visiting the museum would read his name, learn about his service, understand that heroes sometimes fly missions no one ever hears about. Warren saved the document and closed his laptop. Through the window, he could see the Washington Monument lit against the night sky. Somewhere in this city, in a museum built to honor achievement and sacrifice, his father's jet waited to tell its story to tomorrow's visitors. Mission accomplished, Warren thought. Not just Raymond's mission or his own, but the mission all of them had shared, to let truth survive, to let honor be acknowledged, to ensure that sacrifice, even silent sacrifice, was never forgotten. Warren turned off the light and lay down, his father's dog tags resting on the nightstand beside Raymond's compass. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Warren Hollis slept deeply, dreamlessly, at peace. The truth had survived. Justice had prevailed. And two brothers, separated by death but united in purpose, could finally rest.